Welcome to the first live stream of the End Time Tribune. I am your host, Matthew Miller, of course. And with us today, we have our longtime friend and comrade, L.A. Marzulli. It's such a good pleasure to have him back on. It's been a long time. I remember the first time that we talked with L.A., it was on a round table with he and Stan Deyo. It was a very good interview, very good day. And we certainly appreciate him coming on. And tonight we're going to be talking with L.A. about his brand new release. Let's go ahead and get that on so everybody can take a very good look at it here. Go to lamarzulli.net. It's his new gig. Now, I've for 10 years known him to be lamarzulli.wordpress, but this is a new site. And if you want to get this documentary, just go to that site, lamarzulli.net. You click on the store, and that will give you an itemization, and you'll see here on the Trail of the Nephilim, episode 4, the American Stonehenge, the Canaanite connection. Very excited to talk with L.A. about this newest release of his. So, L.A., boy, it's been a while since we had you on, and tell us about, your current situation, how things are going your way, and then get straight into your description of this new work of yours.
Well, I've lived on this property, and I'm in a 28-foot trailer here, deep in the heart of the Santa Monica Mountains. I've lived on this property basically for 42 years, so it's home. My wife and I have been married 35 years, and when we bought it, there wasn't a tree on it. And we landscaped it, and it was a labor of love over the 35 years. Of course, the fire completely destroyed absolutely everything. I mean, everything. So we're back here. We planted some pepper trees. We've got the upper deck finished out, which looks fantastic. That looks down the canyon to the ocean. It's 80 degrees here today, and this is why I love California. The politics here are abysmal, but remember that, I've got a little itch here, but both Jesus movements, the Azusa Street revival and the Jesus movement in the 60s, started right here in California. So let's not give up on California. We need to pray for California. Some people say as California goes, so goes the rest of the nation. That used to be true. I don't think it is anymore, but wouldn't it be great if we had a revival and a reformation here in California? So yeah, we're very close to getting a building permit. Might have it by the time I return here, early March. I'm only gone to do the Hear the Watchman conference in Dallas, and then I'll be staying all through March, and then I'll be flying back from here to Newark, Ohio for the Nephilim Again conference with Russ Dizdar, Drew Graffia, Chief Joseph Riverwind, and of course yours truly. Basically 3 days of in your face on the trail of a Nephilim. I'll be taking the entire group out to the Great Circle Mound, lecturing about that, tying it into the films that we've made about the mysterious mound builders. So that's a great conference. You can go to NephilimAgain.com, NephilimAgain.com, and there are plenty of seats left right now. And I think there's going to be, but we have room for 500, and after that the doors close. But right now there's plenty of seats, so sign up, folks. It's going to be a great conference, lots of really cool information.
Well, L.A., that being said, I've got to get right out of the gates. On your blog, you released this new new footage, and I've got to get your take on this, because it looks like in the background as NASA is recording this, it seems to morph and change shape and then go vertical. I didn't even know what to make of it. It because in the beginning it definitely looks like a diamond-shaped craft, but then it turns into something else. Now I understand the further it got out, the more pixelated it got, but it definitely looked like it morphed. LA, what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's high strangeness, and what's amazing about this is that we see the mainstream media, including NASA, never a straight answer, go figure. They're actually talking about this and leaking or allowing the footage to spill out. We had disclosure back in 2017 on Tucker Carlson. I blogged about this. I'll be discussing that at the Hear the Watchman conference not this weekend, but the following weekend down in Dallas. And This is, in my opinion, the coming great deception. I've been talking about this for well over 25 years and continue to do so. Um, this will change everything when they actually arrive and just sit there and not play this little cat and mouse game. This will change everything. It is a mega lever. It changes the existing paradigm globally and does it like that. So we had disclosure on Tucker Carlson in 2017. Most of you, I'm assuming your audience, has seen the footage. They had Commander David Fravor on. It's Tucker Carlson's show, so Commander David Fravor was being interviewed. Fravor is an unknown guy. He's a former F-18 pilot, and they had what was at one time classified footage of Fravor's encounter with a tic-tac shaped UFO hovering over the Pacific Ocean just outside of San Diego. And Fravor, when asked by Tucker Carlson on national TV, it's not George Norian coast to coast, it's Fox News. What do you think this was? And Fravor looks right at the camera and says, whatever this thing was not of this world. Was not of this world. So that was disclosure. From that came the book, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year-old cover-up, which you can go again by going to the website, lamarzulli.net. And the reason why I do this stuff, folks, you got to understand what's going on here. I mean, I've been warning against this for over 25 years. I mean, actively warning against it, especially in the last 20. And this is the coming great deception. And it's happening in real time. It's happening now. UFOs are real. They're burgeoning. They're not going away. And the church, unfortunately, is woefully asleep when it comes to all of this. I mean, they're like way in the back someplace, not addressing it, not telling the congregation what it is. Now, some churches are. Pastor John Kilpatrick, as I blogged this week, Pastor John Kilpatrick flew me down to into Georgia, and I got a Sunday morning and spoke basically for an hour and a half, 2 hours. The warfare from the enemy was unbelievable that weekend. Even Pastor John said the same thing. He said, "Man, I could see you struggling up there under the warfare, but you persisted and you prevailed, which it's what you got to do." But the warfare was unbelievable. We had all sorts of weird technical problems and stuff. And because the prince of the power of the air is the prince of the power of the air. And sometimes, for whatever reason, the Lord allows it to manifest that way. So we had a lot of technical difficulties, stuff that was just bizarre. And everyone who was there that's part of a tech team said, wow, we've never experienced anything like this. So the enemy doesn't want the information out, always tries to shut it down any way he possibly can. But, Matthew, this is the coming great deception. And what people need to understand and realize and come to grips with, that when, not if, it's when they really show up and just sit there. Now, we're getting the cat and mouse game now. I get that. But when they just sit there, like a mile-wide craft comes in and sits over, Duluth or wherever it decides to manifest, the entire planet will just go like this in lockstep. The entire planet, the entire global media will go shift, and they will focus on whatever that craft is. And that's all you will hear, see, and that's all the media will talk about. People have no idea. The grid is hooked in. The last time I really saw the grid in operation was the Fukushima disaster. The grid was active, and it was everywhere. It was on all channels. All you saw was that tidal wave in real time coming in at the Fukushima prefecture and the nuclear reactor and the whole deal. The grid was lit up. What I mean by that, the entire internet, all the satellites, everything was all hooked in, linked in to that. It was unbelievable. They lit up the grid for that. They will light up the grid for this. Every pundit, every commentator will be called to weigh on what's going on. There'll be this incredible debate. People like Stephen Greer will sit there and just, see, I told you. The ancient alien crowd will be telling us, we've been trying to tell you this, the ancient astronaut theorist, for, the last 10 years. I was on the first 2 seasons, and, now they're here, and they seeded us here. E.T. seeded us here. They created all life on this planet. It will literally usurp the idea of a loving God that we read about in our Bibles. And it will just completely change everything. I can't stress that enough.
Well, LA, first off, let me address what you first said. Yes, you are in California, and everybody needs to know this right now. Yes, it is the left coast, and yes, you are on the front lines, and everybody needs to really come to grips with that surely the general listener will be able to appreciate the simple fact that you was literally burned out of your foxhole. But I remember very clearly you telling me this a very long time ago, at least 10 years ago. You told me that, no, this is my home because God told me that He gave it to me. And at the time you were very confused. It was not your land when He said this, but God said, no, this is L.A. Marzulli's land on my planet Earth. And it's everybody needs to realize that you were burned out of your foxhole, but God said, no, we're going to put you right back in that foxhole and get you right back to business. So that being the case, you are on the front lines, no doubt about it. The rest of us, we get to hide out behind the front lines. You, unfortunately, are on the very front lines. And with this new work, you are presupposing with the title that we have Nephilim mounds here in the United States, even bearing to a illicit Canaanite connection. Now, can you expand on that just a little bit?
I will, but before I do that, I want to show you guys something. So, you mentioned that the Lord gave me this land.
Yeah.
Well, basically, I was a brand new Christian 40 years ago. I was doing some landscaping for the previous owner, and I was stacking river rock. That river rock is still there, although in badly need of a repair. FEMA was up here. It's been trampled and moved around, but the basic circle is still there, and I'll go back, and I'm going to do that. And I'm stacking the river rock, and the Lord says, this is yours. The land is yours. You're doing this for yourself. And I just went, what? And 7 years later, we closed escrow on it, my wife and I. And at that time, 40 years ago, when the Lord told me that, I didn't know Peggy. We weren't married. I was single. I was a brand new Christian. So the Lord was faithful when He gave us this property. Fast forward to 2018, when the fire happens, November 9th, we lose everything. We're in Dallas. When the fire hits, my daughter escapes with the animals. And she's lucky to get out alive. That's how crazy it was. The winds were howling at 40 to 50 miles an hour with gusts up to 70, apparently. This thing looked like, it was I've seen pictures. It is absolutely horrific to look at it. It blackened the sky. It was horrific. So when we came up here, all we saw was this burnt out property. And we hightailed it to Oklahoma. We had PTSD. We were in shock for months. And we started to work out of that. We came back in May after FEMA had scraped the land. And I'm there by myself. Everybody was gone. My wife went out with my daughter. I was going to meet up with them later. It's getting around dusk, and I come walking down from the upper deck area, what was the upper deck area, and I go to the same circle where the Lord gave me the property. And the Lord says, pick up a stone. So I pick up a stone, and the Lord goes, this is your promise stone. The land is yours. And I just went, whoa, it's like an Ebenezer. So we're at the airport. I'm not making this up. We're at the airport 4 or 5 months later, okay? 4 or 5 months later. And, I told my wife what the Lord said. The land is yours. This is the billboard at LAX, at the airport.
This land is yours. Now that's classic.
And it's L.A. L.A. It's not
That's
L.A.
right.
like Los Angeles.
Right.
It's L.A. L.A. This land is yours. Santa Monica Mountains. Are you kidding me?
That's off the hook.
We photographed it obviously, and we're blowing that up and hanging it in the new house. It's just unbelievable. Yeah, it's the Lord is amazing the way He has a real sense of humor sometimes. But this is number 4 in the On the Trail of the Nephilim series, American Stonehenge. Excuse me, the Canaanite connection. 5 is also on American Stonehenge, and I'm in post production on that. 6 is on the DNA, which is already done, and we'll release. So we'll have 3 films this year. But let's circle back to American Stonehenge episode 4. the Canaanite connection. And I show this in the film. All right, I'm with Kelsey Stone. Kelsey's the third generation of the Stone family, who have been curators over this very enigmatic and controversial site in New Hampshire. It's called America's Stonehenge. We believe it's 4,000 years old. We believe it has nothing to do with soap making or anything else. It's got alignments that are profound, absolutely profound. And we're going to get into this, the alignments and where they go and what they say, and the connectivity in the second film, which is part 2, because the alignments are mind-blowing. So I'm there with Kelsey a couple of years ago, and I've been there numerous times. And so I was filming, and I used this in the film. It's just Kelsey and myself. I've got a little Osmo camera, and I'm following Kelsey around in the museum. And I go, well, what's this? And he goes, well, this is the display case where we found stones with writing on them. I'm thinking to myself, well, that's interesting, and that's pretty far out. And he goes, I go, well, what's this stone say? And he goes, to Baal of the Canaanites. And you can hear me, and I go, what did you just say? And he goes, oh, it's a dedication stone to Baal of the Canaanites. And I still can't believe what I'm hearing, Matthew. I still can't believe what I'm hearing, because he doesn't get the connection. He doesn't understand the Nephilim connection at that point. Since then, they've come on board with it. They're starting to get an idea of what this site actually may be. And I go, what did you just say? I mean, I'm in utter disbelief. I'm not on camera because I'm holding the Osmo looking at Kelsey, and he starts laughing at me, and he goes, to Baal of the Canaanites. It's a dedication stone. And I'm blown away. So we found out that Dr. Barry Fell, who was a Harvard professor, found the stone at the museum. He came to America's Stonehenge, and the stone was there, and no one knew what it was. No one had translated it. No one knew that it was Proto-Phoenician. No one had any idea. So they discovered the stone. It lay in the museum. No one had any idea what it said on the stone. Barry Fell comes up and looks at it, makes a rubbing of it, and then translates it. And it says, to Baal of the Canaanites. Well, the naysayers attacked, there's one in particular, I won't mention the guy's name, attacked Dr. Barry Fell. And in the film, I show hundreds of papers written by Dr. Barry Fell about this exact thing. He wasn't degreed in this type of stuff, but this is what he also did. Look, I'm not degreed in archaeology, but I'm out looking at sites all the time, and we find things that, frankly, like we talk about in the entire series, On the Trail of the Nephilim, that go against the prevailing paradigm of mainstream archaeology, like the Serpent Mound, which archaeologists will tell us was built by the Shawnee, but the Shawnee said, no, we didn't build it, sorry. We didn't build this. It was here when we got here. So you've got this disparity in thinking, and just because I'm not an archaeologist, I work with degreed archaeologists, and I picked up a whole lot since 2013, and I'm out in the field a lot, and filming a lot, and talking to people about these ancient sites. So America's Stonehenge, we believe, is a 4,000-year-old Canaanite site. And there is an altar, Matthew, on the site. There's an actual altar on the site with a groove around it to catch the blood. The naysayers say, oh, this was used to make soap. Sorry, guys, it wasn't used to make soap. Nice try, but we're not buying that. It sits on 4 pillars of stone, which until, let's say, 40, 50 years ago, were completely hidden. In the film, we show what the table looked like before they excavated. And all you see is a slab at ground level. You have no idea what it is. And so they started excavating, and they realized that, oh my gosh, this whole thing was covered up deliberately. And this became the Sacrificial Altar. It's about 9 feet by 4 or 5 feet, 10 feet, 9 to 10 feet long, 4 or 5 feet wide. It's a trapezoidal shape. It's at a slight incline, so the blood will be collected. Of course, they say it's for soap. Nonsense. And the reason for this is behind the altar is a stone chamber. And in the film, I cut from America's Stonehenge in that stone chamber to Sardinia, the island of Sardinia in the Mediterranean, where almost the identical, it's not quite identical, but there are similarities there that cannot be overlooked. And then from Sardinia to the island of Malta, where I went down to the hypogeum, where you cannot bring a camera. They won't let you photograph it. What are they afraid of, right? And we believe that this was the remains of some labyrinth that perhaps the giants used. In that, there's an oracle chamber. And when you put your head in that round stone, it amplifies and echoes throughout the entire hypogeum, which must have been absolutely terrifying. If you were sealed down there, you would be absolutely terrified, because this whole hypogeum is underground, and it was only discovered in modernity. It lay hidden. And we believe, as others do, that elongated skulls were found there, that there perhaps are traces of giants, because some of the rooms are absolutely humongous and make no sense at all. So the oracle chamber in the hypogeum on the island of Malta, when you go to America's Stonehenge, there was also an oracle chamber. So when you're behind the altar, hidden in this chamber, you're in a chamber behind the altar that you don't know is there, because it just looks like part of a landscape. It's got moss on top of this roof and some sort of a like a clay cement mixture, which is waterproof the entire chamber. So the entrance was obviously secret at one point, and someone would stand in there and talk through this oracle, and that would reverberate underneath the altar at America's Stonehenge. So why does a soap making factory need that? They don't. And this is what the naysayers will always, point to this, but they'll forget to tell you all this other data, which is what we do in the film. But there's this chamber that's right next to the oracle chamber, which is very similar to the one that we found on the island of Sardinia in the Tomb of the Giants, where someone would go in there and lay. They would sleep there at night in this chamber. It's certainly long enough for a human being. Very, very. It's actually longer than a 6-foot human. You can lay in there, and the reason why they do this is for occult ritualistic stuff. On Sardinia, you would go in there. The giants are buried underneath. They've never been excavated, to the best of my knowledge, maybe 20 feet or whatever. So they would go in there and commune with the spirits of the dead giants, the dead Nephilim, and take that power into themselves. We see exactly the same type of thing, in my opinion, in America's Stonehenge. So we see similarities between America's Stonehenge, what we see in the hypogeum in Malta, which I believe is also a Nephilim site, and what we see in Sardinia. They came out of the Levant, and they pushed westward. And guess what? Malta is right there, and then Sardinia, and then southern Spain, and then into Portugal, and into the UK, Stonehenge in England, and other places. We've been to all these places. We've got hours and hours and hours of film, which I got to get busy and start editing. But we should have 3 or 4 films out this year in the Alma Trail of a Nephilim series. And Matthew, before I turn it back to you, there is a hidden history that has been deliberately obfuscated by the powers that be. And the reason why it's been deliberately obfuscated is because it points to the validity of the biblical prophetic narrative. People go, well, why do you care about this? Why should we as Christians care about this? Because it shows that this entire planet was under the sway of the dragon. I mean, if we don't care, then why do we care about Moses and Pharaoh? What do you think happens when Moses shows up in Pharaoh's court? The entire global paradigm, until Moses and Aaron show up, is completely under the sway of the dragon. Completely. It's the whole paradigm in which everything operates is under the power of the dragon. That's what it is. And Moses and Aaron come in and they break that power. And the rest is history. That's why. My mission statement, our mission statement here at Spiral of Life, which is the name of the ministry, Spiral of Life. But it's to expose the deception of the prince of the power of the air, and to herald the return of the King, Jesus. And I'll circle back to the Hear the Watchman conference. I'll be talking about the days of chaos, Matthew 24, Luke 21, Mark 13, this whole prophetic narrative that Jesus, the bullet points that he warns us about, will happen shortly before his return. But we're pointing, the reason why we show all this is to point back to the validity of Scripture and to point to the fact that the King is coming soon.
Well, LA, we're going to have this again because everybody needs to realize that's what Revelation chapter 11 is about. Not only did the dragon get stopped in his tracks by Moses and Aaron. That's absolutely true. It's going to happen again in the midst of the Great Tribulation, so there's no doubt about that. The significance of this thing being right in our backyard is absolutely off the hook.
It is off the hook. Absolutely off the hook. And go ahead, Matthew.
It needs to be addressed. It needs to be reckoned with that this is going to happen again, and we're going to be set up probably much in the same way our ancestors were set up with this antediluvian deception. It's coming back, and we're going to be having a reckoning with it again. It is going to happen again, so I just strongly suggest everybody that if you can get to this latest speaking engagement by LA, I strongly suggest you do so here. I'm right here on his website. The Remnant Warrior Conference is coming March 5th through the 8th, 2020. The Nephilim again, as he already mentioned, March 27th through the 29th. Look, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have another reckoning with this because this antediluvian deception is going to come again. It is. And we don't have enough people in the pulpit addressing the situation, getting the bride ready for the assault. Because one way or another, whether you're under the stint that you're going to be taken out of the scenario by Jesus in a rapturic sort of event, that being set aside, no matter what you believe, the Bible screams this deception is coming again, and no one is speaking to it. And we have evidence now in our own backyard. And as far as I'm concerned, LA, this is what I've always thought. That Mundus Novus, i.e. the New World, not just America, the entire New World was literally the dragon's playground. I believe that this is why, even perhaps we have the Chicxulub impact crater. All the scientists seems to think that took care of the dinosaurs. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the Bible testifies that we had a lot bigger problems than dinosaurs. So, LA, what's your thoughts on that? That this was the devil's playground and no one is addressing this? Well, you being set aside, of course, but I've already stated this once. You're on the front lines. What's your thoughts about this being the devil's playground and these things coming to fruition again?
Well, I mean, it absolutely is, and I want to give a shout out to my good friend and colleague Fritz Zimmerman, whose work really opened my eyes to the whole mound builders. And Fritz comes in on 1, 2, and 4. Actually, pretty much all the films so far. Fritz has been in them, and I owe a debt to Fritz because Fritz opened my eyes and opened the doors. His book is called Nephilim in the Ohio Valley. No, the Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley. The Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley. And I remember looking at that book going, you've got to be kidding me. And again, I owe another debt to Russ Dizdar. It's always good to give shout outs to people who, you're on whose shoulders and who gave you a leg up, essentially. Now, I'm making films on this. I've taken it perhaps further than anybody's ever taken it. I don't know. And that will be, for people to figure out after I'm long gone. But the bottom line is, Russ Dizdar I was at a conference in Newark, Ohio years ago, and Russ calls me up and goes, "Hey, LA, do you know where you're going?" I go, "Yeah, Russ, I'm going to Newark, Ohio for a conference." And he just starts laughing. And he goes, "No, do you know where you're going?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm going to Newark, Ohio." And he just starts laughing. And he goes, "Are you by a computer?" And I say, "Yeah." And he says, "Google Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley." So I Google it, and there's Fritz's book. And I just went, "You have got to be kidding me." I found out that we were staying at the hotel about 2 miles, 3 miles up from the Great Circle Mountain. And on Sunday, after we were done the conference, before dinner, I had free time. And so the conference was ended. I had like this period of time. And I said to my host, I said, "Look, I want to go to the Great Circle Mountain. Do you know where that is?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's right down the street." And I go, "Have you ever been there?" And he goes, "No, I drive by it every day." And I'm going, "What? You drive by it every day? You've never been there?" The guy lived there like 17 years or something. So he drops me off in the parking lot. And I start walking up this asphalt pathway. And to my left I can see there's this circular mountain. It's huge. And I get to the top and I make a left-hand turn, and there's the entrance to the Circle Mountain. And I stand at the entrance, Matthew, with barely breathing, with every nerve cell in my body reverberating, and just like I'm kind of reliving it now, like goosebumps all over me. And I'm just standing there in the entrance, completely, utterly blown away by what I'm seeing. And I'm going, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh." And I had already been to Peru and seen, Sacsayhuaman and all that. But this just blew everything wide open. And I've gone back to the Circle Mountain. I'll be lecturing at the Circle Mountain again. I think our team was the only team in modernity, at least that I'm aware of, that actually had a surveyor go into the mound and find out how level is the moat. The Great Circle Mountain is about 1,200 feet in diameter. And in the interior of it, it has a moat, which goes down in some places like, it's very deep. And we film all this, and we show what it looks like in the film. So Todd Willis, who's a surveyor, and by the way, has no Nephilim dog in the hunt, he's standing in the bottom of the moat, and that's when you start to get an idea of how much dirt are we talking about here, and what are we really looking at. So Todd takes modern day surveying tools and goes out and surveys this thing, and finds out it's six inches to a foot out of level in 1,200 feet. And folks, that can be accounted for by thousands of years of slough going into certain parts and not being, for all practical purposes, the moat is essentially dead level. And it begs the question, how did they do that in the ancient world? And this is where it gets, and I show this at conferences, and people just laugh hysterically. Modern day archaeologists insist that Native Americans built these mounds with these primitive hoes and clamshell hoes and digging sticks and the shoulder bones of deer scapula, which was made into a hoe. And in the film, we demonstrate that. We take a guy out, and he has got a flint hoe, and he's digging in soil. And we time him the amount of time it takes to do one bucket and move it. It's over 18 minutes to move one bucket of earth. And then we show him like planting down the soil with his feet. Well, we've never even got into the compaction part. How did they compact the soil in these mounds thousands of years ago? And we don't know. There's a lot of conjecture, but we don't know. And we know, let's say, for instance, that Graves Creek Mound, when they went into it, they discovered that the compaction was so tight that they didn't need to shore up the ceiling. Do you believe that? How was that done? And we don't know yet. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to get permission to do a compaction test of the soil. But of course, it's that the powers that be won't let you touch anything. But I digress. So what we show is it would take about 20, what's the number? Remember that single buckets of earth? It's like 27 million. I'd have to go back and look at the number. But it's something like 27 million single buckets of earth. 27 million single buckets of earth to make up, let's say, the largest mound in America, Cahokia. What that translates into something that people might be able to get a visual on, and there was a series of these dirt dump trucks essentially on Pacific Coast Highway, and I filmed them because they were all end to end. So what this looks like is you get dump trucks end to end, right? No, bumper to bumper, end to end, right? It's 200 miles of dump trucks, Matthew, end to end, to make Cahokia, to make Miamisburg, and some of these other very large mounds. So we are looking at something which makes no sense. And the fact that archaeologists insist that Native Americans built them, when Native Americans say, no, we didn't build them, they were here when we got here. So who do we believe? You see, it's funny. If I come up with my if I come up with my paradigm and say Native Americans didn't build it, I'm called a racist. All right. But when the Native Americans themselves, like Chief Wallace of the Shawnee, say no, the Shawnee didn't build the Serpent Mound, somehow we're going to ignore what Chief Wallace says, and we're going to go with what academia and modern day archaeologists say. So who's the real racist here? They discount Chief Wallace because, well, she doesn't know what she's talking about. You built them. You just forgot that you had done so. That is the prevailing paradigm, that Native Americans built the mounds, but they had just simply forgotten that they had done so.
Well, I take great umbrage with that because
I do too.
I have talked to many a Native American, and they never stayed in one spot for very long. They were seasonal. Of course, they had to move because of the weather. And they'll all tell you this, at least everyone I've ever talked to. Now, I don't ever remember this being chronicled that they were building any sort of permanent huge structures like you're talking about these mounds. I've never heard of that. That's a farce. That's a farce for you to even suggest that the Native American Indians were doing these mounds. That's a joke, LA. That's a joke. And it should be concerning to everybody that, look, this is the consistent narrative, LA. Let's bury it, let's cover it up. If it's in Egypt, just get the bulldozers and fill it in with sand, right?
You got it.
It's the prevailing narrative. Just cover it up. When LA, you just stated that these rooms you've been in, where the doorway was like, 25-foot tall doorway. Look, there is no reason, there is no rhyme. When you're talking about purely human species, you always talking about how to gate an opening that big to protect the city. Look, LA, go to all archaeological sites. It's amazing how they completely contradict themselves when it comes to anything of Nephilim sort of archaeology. They just bury it. Whatever they can do to bury it, that's what they're going to do. And that needs to stop. It absolutely needs to stop. And the only way it can stop is for you to chronicle it. Someone has to chronicle it, LA.
Well, in episode 4, America Stonehenge, we cut over to, we're in Israel, at this very remote site called Tel Gezer. It's off the beaten path. Tour people don't go there. In fact, our tour guide, Kuti, was going, why do you want to go to Tel Gezer? Nobody comes here. There's nothing to see. Why do you want to come here? I go, Kuti, because it's what I do. And I lectured there. We filmed there. When we got there, we knew that there was a waterway that was cut in the rock that went down a tunnel. Went down to the water source. But we had no idea what that really looked like. And when we get there, we discover that the tunnel is 20 feet high. So on film, and this is in number 4, America Stonehenge, the Canaanite connection. Tel Gezer is a Canaanite city. Okay, Tel Gezer is a Canaanite city, complete with a basin that could hold blood. In fact, that's what the signage says. All these menhirs that are standing up like this in a straight line, And then at the city itself, the huge boulders, huge stones where the gates were, and then the 20-foot high tunnel which goes down into the earth. There are niches in the wall. There are pillars which were toppled down. It was a ritualistic site. And I look at the archaeologist, young guy, and I go, let me ask you something. Why does a 5'6" Canaanite guy need a 20-foot high tunnel? And the guy right on camera says, we're not sure of that. We don't have an answer to that. But yeah, you're right. It could be because they were really big. Because the tunnel is 20 feet high.
Well,
need I say more?
LA, now look. The best we can do is the Bronze Age, let's say. Using Bronze Age tools. What are you talking about? Like, so they put ladders up on the side to make the crevasse 20 feet high. LA, that does not even make sense.
No, it makes no sense, and you wouldn't do that. If you and I were making tunnels, we'd make them, maybe 7 feet tall, have a little headroom, and that's it. But that's not what we see here. We see a 20-foot high tunnel, and we know it's a ritualistic Canaanite city. We know that. Tel Gezer, and I led a tour there, and I was just blown away by what we saw. Just like in the film, we show aerial footage of Gilgal Raphaim, one of the first people to actually get in there. Mondo Gonzalez and I went into the chamber and we filmed inside the chamber. We haven't released that film yet. Again, there's so many places we've been, so many things that we've seen, and we're just starting to leach it out in the films to show the connectivity between the Holy Land, the Middle East, and the way they're seeing this diaspora of giants, just like you talked about earlier. This was the dragon's playground, and it was. They were over here. Absolutely, they were over here. And they created these sites that we see, and then they just disappear. And that's a whole other story, which gets into catastrophism, which gets into the hand of God moving, like we see with Sodom and Gomorrah. We've got biblical texts which tell us that God allows the sin of the Amorites to come into its fullness before he acts, just like Sodom and Gomorrah. He allows it to just reach its peak, and then he does something. So we think that's what happened in a lot of these different places, like the Great Circle Mound, the Octagon Mound complex in Ohio, that they were there. And Matthew, we talked about this when we talked about Mathematical Mysteries of the Mound Builders, which is the second film. And the Octagon, when you're in it, when you stand in the Octagon, you have no idea what you're looking at. You have no idea. When you're at the Serpent Mound in Ohio, you have no idea really. It's a serpent because that's what the signage says. But what is this thing? And then you're 200 feet above, looking down, you see the serpent with its mouth wide open in the act of swallowing an egg. When you're in the Octagon Mound, you don't know what you're looking at, but when you're hundreds of feet above, you see it's a perfectly shaped octagon. How would you do that in the ancient world? How would you even know what you were making? How would you check your work? Oh, and by the way, the Octagon Mound is built on an 18.5 year lunar cycle, which creates a whole other set of problems. How would you know? How do you know? How do any ancient cultures even know that the moon is on an 18.5 year lunar cycle? The only way, and then we're drilling down into this, the only way to understand that is to go out and somehow look at the moon rise and look at it set and chart that. And then you got to crunch the data. How do you do that? And then what happens if you've got 10 or 15 days, which we see in Ohio, where it's completely overcast and you can't see the moon for 5, 10, 15 days, which has happened. Now what? And then how would you crunch the data thousands of years ago to even know where you were in the cycle? How would you even know where you were in the cycle? 18.5 years of data? What are we writing on? Deer hide? Are you flipping kidding me? We are looking at something that's just profound. And the Book of Enoch, which is non-canonical, I get that, but we can at least appreciate its historicity. The Book of Enoch states that Sariel, one of the fallen watcher angels, came down and handed that knowledge to mankind, showed them precession, showed them the precession of the lunar cycle. That's where it came from. It was just given to us. This knowledge, it's so amazing. If you don't hold a supernatural worldview, then you can't get there, which is, welcome to ancient aliens. They know something's going on, but because they don't believe in the Bible, they never really understand what it is that they're looking at, with all due respect, in my opinion. Of course, they'll say that I'm, closed-minded and just narrow-minded because I believe in the biblical narrative. But the biblical narrative holds the keys, holds the answers. And this is why we as Christians should be pushing back against the prevailing paradigm that we see every Friday on Ancient Aliens. And I watch Ancient Aliens. I need to watch. It's part of what I do. But we need to understand that there's a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated by the powers that be, which in my opinion point to the validity of a supernatural worldview. And that's why we're on the trail. That's why we're on the trail of the Nephilim. www.lamarzulli.net.
Amen to that. Amen to that. That is why you're on the trail. That's why you're on the front lines. That's why you're out there in the vanguard against this coming deception. And LA, especially the people of the United States churches, oh my goodness, are they going to be blindsided if even a fraction of the events that occur that you think are coming yourself, they're not going to know they're not going to be able to process it. Their faith is going to snap like a twig.
I agree. And Matthew, the question is, how much are we going to see before we get taken out of here? I mean, that's the question. We're already seeing stuff. So it's like, you look at the coronavirus. You look at the earthquakes in diverse places. You look at the wars and rumors of wars. You look at the rise of lawlessness. Whoa, what do you mean, LA, the rise of lawlessness? Excuse me, gay marriage is a law of the land. Excuse me, 70 million abortions in America? If that's not lawlessness, I don't know what is. It completely goes against God's law. And I'm not being a homophobe when I say that. It goes against God's law. End of story. It goes against what he set up. The idea of a woman's right to choose is the biggest lie that's ever been foisted up the flagpole, ever been put on the shoulders of women. It's evil. It's beyond evil. 70 million aborted babies in America, 1.5 or 1.6 billion worldwide since Roe v. Wade. I'll give you an idea, Matthew, what that looks like to people, because people can't grasp that number. I can't. So if we went up to the North Pole and went over to Alaska, and then went all the way down Alaska, zigzagged through the state, went all through the Canadian provinces, came down in New York and traversed over to the West Coast, back to the East Coast, to the Carolinas, back to Southern California, back down to Florida. Then we went down to the Panhandle of Texas and down into Mexico, and went through Central America and all those countries in there, and then slowly zigzagged our way, Ecuador and Colombia and Peru and Brazil, and just kind of wound our way down to Tierra del Fuego. So from the North Pole to Tierra del Fuego, you want to know what 1.5 billion people look like? You wouldn't see a soul. You wouldn't see a soul in the Americas. North, Central, and South America. Not one person you would see. That's what 1.5 billion people look like. That's what 1.5 billion people look like.
Oh my God. You're talking about an extinction level event.
Absolutely.
Well, up on your screen right now, ladies and gentlemen, go to lamarzulli.net store, and you will see on the trail of the Nephilim, American Stonehenge, the Canaanite connection. This is 4 in the series. You can get all the series, as you can see on your screen here. And LA didn't mention it, but I really don't care. We're going to go over to his Patreon account. You can see on your screen here, you've got the tip jar for $1. You've got a monthly update from LA for $5, and you've got random post and video media for $10. Go do it. LA needs to be supported, because you're talking about the special forces of the Christian church right here. Here is his YouTube channel if you want to go check that out. LA, can you tell the viewers what other ways they can connect with you? We've only got 2 minutes left, LA, because you have to prep for another broadcast at 5 o'clock your time, so we need to get off here in 2 minutes. So LA, you can give out any information you'd like, any sites, pimp anything you'd like.
Well, we're going to be here at the Watchman Conference on March 5th, followed by Nephilim again followed by Prophecy Watchers, and then, of course, Steve Quell's conference in July. So, in each of those, I'll be talking about different things, different presentations. There's no repeats. So hopefully I'll see it here at the Watchman Conference, Days of Chaos. That's what I'll be speaking on, my book, Days of Chaos. And then, of course, Nephilim Again Conference, where we'll be talking about the Nephilim and everything that we talked about tonight. But thanks for having me on, Matthew. Really appreciate it. And you can go to lamarzulli.net, lamarzulli.net.
Well, LA, boy, we need to get you on soon. Ladies and gentlemen, please support LA. He's not only on the front lines, he's in the vanguard of preparing the body for this coming great deception. So keep him in your prayers, and especially his wife, as they try to make a home there in that place where the Lord, their God, gave them. So, LA, until next time, God bless and Godspeed.
God bless you, Matthew. Nice to see you. Nice to talk to you. God bless.